WatchCharts is the world's leading secondary watch market research platform. Dive into the data yourself at watchcharts.com. There are worse ways to get started in watches if you're a new enthusiast than by buying a dive watch. The dive watch genre as a whole just has a feature set that is very well suited to somebody who's just getting used to the idea of wearing a mechanical watch or a nice luxury watch per se. And the feature set is essentially the watch is designed to withstand a bunch of abuse on a day-to-day basis. It's waterproof, and it's to some degree shock-proof, and it's just a very sort of well-designed object that is designed to really take whatever you want to throw at it. And of course, there's much more to watches than just something that you can put on without having to think about how it's going to maybe get impacted throughout the day, or if it's going to get dinged up or anything like that. But dive watches certainly are, in today's age, certainly one of the most popular ways to get into watches. So what we want to talk about in this video today is what the tier list looks like for dive watches by value retention, which is to say that if instead of looking at watches and seeing what they cost at retail and what sort of value for money proposition you get there, what we'd like to do instead is look at what the premium or discount is for those watches when they are available on the secondary market, if they are in fact in production today, and then how much of a discount or a premium you have to pay to acquire them. This is, again, given that these are dive watches, this is relevant because if you're in the market for your first watch and you're not sure if you're going to hang on to it for a while, then depending on what the value retention looks like, that may or may not factor into your decision-making calculus for which watch you want to buy. So the point here is to basically convey the information, and then hopefully that helps you make a decision about what you'd like to buy if you are in fact interested in getting a dive watch. So what we'll do is we'll run through a couple dozen watches in this video, and we'll also show you what sort of tiering we would put them into. So we'll look at the watches, the references, their current retail prices, their current market prices, and then based on the delta between the market price and the retail price, what the value retention looks like. So we'll kick it off in alphabetical order with the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore, reference 15720 ST. This has a retail price of $30,200, and the black dial version in particular has a market price of $31,100 for a value retention of plus 3%. This is essentially saying that it's trading on the secondary market for the same, more or less, amount of money as you would pay for this watch at retail, assuming you can find one. The AP Royal Oak Offshores in particular are, luxury dive watches, if there is such a thing. They seem to meet the definition very well. And in this instance, if you get one, regardless of whether you buy it pre-owned or new, you're essentially paying the same amount of money. The next one we'll look at is a Blancpain 50 Fathoms Bathyscaphe. This is the standard edition with the black dial, and this one retails for $11,000 and has a current market price of $6,700. So we go from the AP having essentially not lost any money to the Blancpain having, as we will see by the end of this list, actually one of the worst value retention figures in this list. The Breitling Super Ocean 42 reference A17375 retails for $5,000 and has a current market price of $3,800. That gives it a value retention loss or discount of 24% over its list price. So I'll pause here for a second just to underscore this point about both the Blancpain and the Breitling compared to the AP, because I think it's an interesting contrast. You could buy the AP, keep it for a little while, and then decide to sell it, and you wouldn't necessarily lose any money doing that. But if you did that with the Blancpain, you bought it brand new at the retail price and from an AD and walked out the store, and a few months later decided, you know what, yeah, this was nice, but I'm not sure I want to keep it. Maybe I'll sell it. If you do, you're going to be taking a pretty massive hit on resale. And so if you know going in that you're not sure you're going to keep this watch for the longer haul, or if buying brand new at an AD is not something that you particularly care about, or if you're new to watches and you're not sure what your tastes are like, and this is one of the things that has caught your eye and you're interested in sort of experiencing it firsthand. These are the sorts of watches that, I think it would be far easier to recommend buying pre-owned and letting somebody else take the hit on the depreciation than essentially paying the cost of acquiring that education or that experience as a collector yourself. So if we look at the Super Ocean 44, the reference A17376, this has a retail price of $5,050 and actually has a market price that's slightly lower than the 42 millimeter version of the same watch, and therefore slightly worse value retention. My guess for why this would be, if I were to take a bet, would be that the larger size is just not as popular, and so therefore on the secondary market loses even more value. Speaking of large watches, or ungainly watches rather, the Grand Seiko Spring Drive Diver SBGA 461 is another one that I would sort of place in the same context. It's got a retail price of $6,100 and a market price of $4,700, and it loses about the same amount of money on the secondary market as the Breitlings do. But the reason this is sort of the other reason this is interesting to sort of talk about in the same context is that the bracelets on these watches are, they have these built-in dive suit extensions, and functionally they are amazing watches, but as a daily wear watch with just like extra stuff going on the bracelet, I don't know how comfortable it really is on a day-to-day basis for many people. And certainly the market price discount over retail would suggest that other people feel the same way, and that once these watches are out there, there's not as much demand for them on the secondary market. If we look at a non-spring drive diver from Grand Seiko, the SBGH 289, this has an even worse value retention of 33% loss. Moving on to IWC and the Aquatimer family, the reference 328801 retails for $6,100, just like one of the Grand Seiko divers, and actually manages to hold on to a little bit more of its value with a market price of $5,200, only losing about 15% as far as value retention is concerned. So this is also where we start seeing not just a hierarchy between watches, but also some level of a hierarchy between brands beginning to emerge, where because IWC is a more popular brand in the public consciousness than perhaps Blancpain or Breitling have been, or Grand Seiko has been globally over the last decade and a bit, these watches are starting to now not lose as much value. But then if we look at a brand like Jaeger LeCoultre, the Polaris reference 906867 has a retail price of $10,000 and loses 37% of that on the secondary market. So even though JLC makes watches that are desirable in some circumstances, certainly within the Polaris family, the stock standard steel model with a black dial is not doing as well on the secondary market. So yes, even though as you move from brand to brand, you may see some sort of upmarket movement in how much value retention is retained, so to speak, even within brands that are more popular or more well-known, there can be watches that certainly don't do as well. The Omega Seamaster reference, one very long number, just like all Omega Seamaster references are, but in this particular instance is the No Time to Die James Bond edition, retails for $9,500. Back when these came out, they were available at around that price on the secondary market, maybe even at times at a little bit of a premium, but now they're sitting at a solid 20% discount. So if this is a watch that you wanted and is, again, because it's Bond inspired or Bond themed, is somewhat topical, and so maybe not as long-lived a design, this is another one that certainly from my perspective I would suggest buying used. And then if you sort of stick with that vein of giving advice, then even though the Seamaster 300M with a black dial loses 29% of its value, this in fact is a watch that you could buy new because it falls into the category of, oh, I want a nice watch and maybe this is the only nice watch I'll ever have. And so if that's sort of like, a more important consideration for you, then whether or not it loses value on the secondary market really is immaterial, because the watch is not bought with the intention of, or with the expectation of it being sold someday. where such a loss would in fact get realized. These watches are bought the Blancpain 58, the Pelagos 39, other watches sort of in the same sort of price bracket, luxury dive watches from mid-level brands. It's not all about value retention, but certainly if value retention is what's on your mind, then buyer beware certainly on the primary market for these watches. And then lastly, just to round out the Omega model family, the Planet Ocean, which retails for $6,700 with the black dial, loses even more value than the other two Seamasters. And that, again, is probably because the Planet Ocean is not as popular as a Seamaster. Certainly in my experience, it's a far chunkier watch, and so it's just not as comfortable for me to wear. And then, of course, if we're talking about dive watches, you can't really not cover Rolex. And so the first one we'll talk about is the 126610 LV, the Starbucks retail price of $10,800 and market price of $16,400 for a table leading value retention of 52%. When we get to the end of the video, I'll resort this view by value retention so you can sort of see what that view looks like. But staying within the Rolex family, if we look at the 126610, which is also the Submariner with date, but this time with a black ceramic bezel, the retail on that is slightly less, and the market price is also not as inflated as it is for the green bezeled version. And if we look at just the standard no-date version, the reference 124060, that has a value retention premium that is very comparable, 33%, to the black ceramic bezels date versions, 35%. But of course, within Rolex dive watch family, there's also the Sea Dweller, and so the 126600 has a retail price and a market price of around $13,500. Value retention again is just 3%. So again, the Submariner, far more popular, far more in demand. That explains why the premium exists. And then of course the green dial version has an even higher premium because it's in even more demand. But the Sea Dweller, relative to these other super hype models, is just at a relatively paltry 3%. And then, of course, if we're talking about Rolex, we also kind of have to mention Seiko. To me, I feel like you can't, in some ways, if you're talking about watches in a generic fashion, the way we are right now with dive watches, not mention, let's say, the best of Switzerland without mentioning the best of Japan. And Seiko certainly sort of fits that bill. So the Prospex Diver, reference SPB 143, retails for $1,200 and has a market price of $800, and so loses a considerable chunk of its retail value. But of course, what's also important to keep in mind when we look at watches at such low retail price points is that the value retention calculation can become sort of a little bit, I don't know if misleading is the right word, but it's not necessarily telling the full picture, because you're losing $400 off of the retail value, which, because the retail price is so low in absolute terms, means that proportionally, you end up seeing a value retention figure like 33%. Whereas if you look at the difference in the retail price and the market price for the Sea Dweller 126600, for example, the difference between those two watches in an absolute sense is $450, which is more than the loss in value for the SPB 143. But of course, that's just in absolute terms. Given the fact that the Sea Dweller is a $13,000 watch, it's a $450 difference in price is proportionally far smaller. So it's just a way of saying these watches that sit at lower price points may have highly inflated value retention losses, but that's also to some degree just inescapable artifact of the fact that the absolute value of the retail price is so low. The Prospex Solar reference SMJ025, the Arnie from Seiko, which retails for $525, goes for $350 on the secondary market. Again, very similar sort of value retention discount to the more upscale Prospex Diver. Tag Heuer makes the Aqua Racer, the reference WBP2110, retails for $2,850. On the secondary market, this loses 40% of its value for a market price of just $1,700. And It's now time to talk about Tudor because, of course, we're moving through the list alphabetically, so we had to wait a while to get to them. But the Pelagos 39, reference 25407, which retails for $4,600, is already the most popular Pelagos reference on the secondary market, even though it's been on the market for less than a year. However, as we have seen with every other hyped dive watch from Tudor, when it was first announced, there was a little bit of a premium over the retail price. That has entirely disappeared, and now we're just sitting at a 4% discount on the secondary market over retail price for what is an incredible dive watch. And then, of course, if we're talking about Tudor, we have to talk about the Blancpain 58s, the 79030N with the black dial and gilt markers, and the 79030B, the blue dial. And these retail for $3,950 and have a value retention discounts now of about 24% and 29% respectively, which is quite a remarkable development considering that when the first Blancpain 58 came out in 2018, they were on a waiting list. And so if you wanted to buy one at retail, the expectation was that you would pay in full with your AD and wait for some undetermined amount of time before Tudor actually had a watch available to sell to you. But now these watches are, sitting at over 20% discounts on the secondary market over their retail prices. And if you want to buy them at retail, you can actually, pretty much walk into any AD, certainly in the United States today. And if they don't have the exact one you want on a bracelet, on a strap, then certainly they would be able to order it for you, and you wouldn't necessarily have to wait very long to get these watches. And then just within sort of to round out the Pelagos family, the 25610 TNL, which is the left-handed version of the Pelagos, something that I'm partial to for my personal tastes, has just as bad a value retention as the blue-dialed Blancpain 58. And if, just to round out the set, we also look at the 25600 TB, which is the black-dialed Pelagos that has a value retention that's slightly worse than the left-handed version. Because the left-handed version is a bit more exotic, it is able to command a little bit of a premium on the secondary market, which is actually also even true of the GMT Master family, where the Sprite or the Destro GMT, as far as the steel models are concerned, has a higher premium on the secondary market than the Batman or the Pepsi variants in steel do. We'll conclude Tudor with just spending a moment talking about the Blancpain Black, which is the OG 41mm Blancpain. And, this also has a discounted price on the secondary market, which is 33% lower, or a full third lower than its current retail price. So when we put all of these watches sort of together into this view where you can see them segmented by value retention, I think what becomes obvious is that it's, first off, just a pretty big spread from minus 40% to plus 52%. And depending on your motivations and your personal preferences for what interests you about any given watch, whether or not you should buy on the primary market or the secondary market is not, the answer to that question is not necessarily set in stone one way or the other. So it's not a definitive statement to say that the Tudor Blancpain Black should be bought on the secondary market because it loses 33% of its value from its retail price. And so why would you be the one to pay that depreciation cost? Well, you don't have to be, because as I mentioned earlier, if this is just a watch that you intend to keep for a long time, or even maybe forever, or if it's just the one watch you're ever going to have, then that loss in value retention really doesn't matter. What matters far more is what the wearing experience is like, how it makes you feel, and how much you enjoy just having it on your wrist every day. But for something like a no-date sub with 33% value retention, maybe that's the sub you wanted, maybe it's not, but I think when value retention is that high, it becomes almost impossible not to have that be part of the consideration for making a decision on whether or not to buy said watch. But we're not making those decisions for you. We're hopefully just helping provide some useful context to help you determine whether or not you want to buy or enjoy watches at different price points, either buying them through the primary market or the secondary market. If you feel unhappy about any of the rankings here, which are at the end of the day just based objectively on the value retention numbers, or if you're sort of surprised to see anything ending up in whatever section it did, let us know in the comments below. Thanks for listening.